All right, it's 11:30. I think we're ready.
Entonces ya son las 11:30 y estamos listos para empezar la presentación. Si usted desea escuchar esta presentación en español, en un momentico simplemente ubícase al fondo de su pantalla y ahí verás un globito. Puede hacer clic en el globo, de ahí escoger Spanish y ya se está conectando para escuchar en español. Si se está conectando tras un móvil, simplemente empuje los tres puntitos y ahí verás Interpretation. Empuje Interpretation, pues Spanish, pues Done, que significa que ya terminó el proceso y está listo para conectarse. Si tiene cualquier problema, por favor comunícase con nosotros tras el chat. Disfruta de la presentación. Buenos días.
Hello, hello. Welcome to our virtual Six Bridges Book Festival. I'm your moderator, Philip Rex Huddleston. We're glad you joined us today. You're in for a real treat. Before I introduce the authors and our panelists, let me get some housekeeping items out of the way. If you'd like to ask a question during this session, please open your chat box and type it in there. I will get to see all of the different questions as we go along. And I'll try to ask as many of them as I can. With the graphic novel panels, I usually like to keep it as conversational as possible. And let me do some introductions. First off, we have Christopher Brown as the Philip K. Dick Campbell and World Fantasy Award nominated author of Tropic of Kansas, Role of Capture, and Failed State. He also wrote the foreword to Fantagraphics' new expanded edition of Tom Kaczynski's Eisner Award-nominated comics anthology, Beta Testing the Ongoing Apocalypse, which brings us to Tom Kaczynski. Tom Kaczynski is an Eisner Award-nominated cartoonist, writer, and publisher. He is the author of the Cartoon Dialectics series and the forthcoming Trans Terra graphic novel. His comics have appeared in numerous anthologies, including The Nib and Moan. He is the founder of Uncivilized Books, a boutique publishing house that has published acclaimed and award-nominated graphic novels by Gabrielle Bell, Noah Van Sciver, David B., and many more. He also teaches comics at Minneapolis College of Art and Design and University of Minnesota. He lives in Minneapolis with his partner, Nikki, two cats, and a dog. I'll introduce our other panelists after Tom, if you want to take it away.
Oh, wait. Hi, excuse me for the brief interruption. I just want to make sure that I have not been assigned as interpreter. I don't want the Spanish-speaking listeners to miss out. I need to be assigned as an interpreter in order for the function to be on.
Okay. Lauren, did you get that? Lauren, are you there? It hasn't been set up for you.
Okay, that's okay. I know that it's a tight schedule. Please continue and I'll just message with Lauren.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tom, if you'd like to share your screen and tell us a little bit about beta testing the ongoing apocalypse.
Sure thing. Here, I'm just gonna pop that on the screen here. 1 second. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so beta testing the ongoing apocalypse is kind of a reissue of an older book that was called Beta Testing the Apocalypse without the ongoing part. Since we're still kind of in an apocalyptic mood, we felt like it was a good time to kind of revisit the subject and put out a new version of this collection with some new material that kind of brings us up to date in terms of apocalyptic thinking. This, I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about the history of the book. This is the original cover of the book that came out. This came out like 2012, I think, or 2013. This is a full illustration. It's sort of, kind of imagine it as a little bit like kind of like a scientific study of the apocalyptic mind. But really, it's just kind of like a few different kind of science fictional stories set 5 minutes in the future, where it's really kind of set in the same headspace. It's not even kind of the same kind of place or time or whatever. It's just kind of the same headspace. Every character is sort of experiencing a kind of apocalyptic ideation or actual real apocalypses, or maybe localized phenomena. You never kind of know this. It's all a little bit mysterious. So the book is structured a little bit weird. Like this kind of came to me after I kind of finished all the stories. When I was creating the table of contents for the book, I tried to map all the stories against their kind of specific time-space trajectories. So I kind of wanted to map this headspace that I had created in these short stories, every story kind of has its own kind of time-space trajectory mapped against time on the bottom and against space on top. And I'm going to read just a few very short pieces from the book to kind of give you an idea of like how I push and pull through time and space in these stories. So I'm going to start with these are the three stories I'm going to do. I'm going to do White Noise, which is a one-page story, Noise, a History, which is also a one-page story. And then this is the brand new story for this anthology. And I'm not going to read the full story, but I'm going to read kind of an excerpt of it, just kind of take one trajectory that happens within that story. Otherwise, it would be too long. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. And we'll start with White Noise. Here we go. And also, I'm going to show you the full page before I read the individual panels of the story. So, you can kind of see how that looks in the book, gives you an idea of like the spatial arrangement of the panels before I kind of break it into the individual panels. Okay, without further ado, White Noise. One second, I gotta move this thing because it's blocking my text now. Here we go. All right, you can recognize the moment almost instantly. Those already asleep are jarred awake. What you notice is the lack of sound. The constant din of civilization has ground to a halt. Even the fridge stopped purring reassuringly. Is this just a normal fluctuation of the power grid? Then you notice the insects, screeching swarms, oblivious to your presence. How many are there? They were here before mankind. They will still be here after humans go extinct. The cardiovascular system responds. Blood rushes through the veins with deadening violence, activating obscure glands and long-forgotten sensory organs. The imperceptible tectonic drift comes into sharp relief. Continental shelves crash into each other. Ancient remains shift uneasily beneath Earth's crust. Grind. You can even hear the faint radio hum of distant supernovas traveling for aeons through dead space ahead of silent screams of alien worlds engulfed in countless solar holocausts. Click. The fan is being turned on. Of course, this is the classic comics way to depict a character falling asleep. The end. All right, next one, Noise, a History. This one has quite a trajectory. And this is what it looks like. And we'll go one by one. Big Bang, 4 billion BC. Unknown decibels. Waterfall, 880,000 BC, 60 decibels. Santorini eruption, 1650 BC, 200 decibels. The Turkish bombard at the siege of Constantinople, 1453 AD, 120 decibels. 20th Century Limited, North America, 1905 AD, 95 decibels. Rustling of Leaves, Central Park, 1885 AD, 10 decibels. Symphony of the City, 1914 AD, 95 decibels. Nuclear Explosion, Nagasaki, 1945 AD, 248 decibels. Personal audio device, now 90 decibels. The end. Okay, and then the news story, Utopia Dividend. So I'm just setting this up a little bit here since it's a larger story. But basically, the story is of a actor that goes to an island, a weird island, to film a TV show. And the TV show is kind of run by this industrialist. And this gives you a little bit of the idea of what's going on. You know, although the full story goes further out, and the trajectory kind of goes to infinity here. The ocean stretched endlessly below. Water covers 70% of the planet. In deep climate cycles, land has emerged and submerged countless times. What entities await in Atlantean depths below, ready to surface? So this is our character here. So sorry about that. Yeah, so this is what the page is going to look like. And then I'm going to go panel by panel or tier by tier. My agent thinks I'm crazy. A television production on a godforsaken tropical island. Whoops, too fast. If I'm honest with myself, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going, besides curiosity and Nilo. When Nilo calls, you go, even if it is to some remote rock in the middle of the South Pacific. Destination, New Atlantis, distance 50 kilometers, prepare for landing. This is the next page, kind of in context, and then individual panels. It all started as a space fan live stream. He wanted to track the progress on Nilo's revolutionary rocket. Who knew disrupting the space industry would capture ratings gold in a world drowning in tired virtual miasma of reboots, sequels, and revivals? A loose network of YouTube enthusiasts, pirate radios, and ham radio operators generated a huge audience. Nilo seized the opportunity. His space programming became exclusive on Ethernet, his global satellite network. Viewers flocked to space TV, and Ethernet became a big player in the global media ecosystem. Nilo professionalized the launch broadcasts, millions more tuned in. The rocket's landing. Malcolm Blank, redacted, was hired as director of programming. He convinced Nilo to acquire this island as a platform, the New Atlantis Island. To launch new and original programming. Was it a coincidence that the islands, this is again the context and then the individual panels. Was it a coincidence that the island was also a source of rare volcanic ingredient, the key to a new super strong concrete, stronger than Roman concrete, that could be used on rocket pads or on Mars? Miners stumbled on previously undiscovered rock art dating back to the Ice Age. This upended the accepted history of the region. The discovery lifted to prominence Hihu, a local artisan who was now understood to be working in an incredibly ancient artistic tradition. Rumored to be 200 plus years old, legend says that as a boy, Hihu saw mysterious megastructures briefly revealed by the Krakatoa tsunami. Then Hihu declared Nilo to be sent by the gods. It became a bit of a scandal. Nilo was accused of taking advantage. Instead of running from it, Nilo adopted Hihu's ancient iconography into his branding. The New Atlantis set became the testing ground for the new concrete. After stress tests were completed, it became clear that the central ziggurat set piece would outlive the pyramids of Giza. Here's the next page. Again, this is the context. The characters are having a little bit of a cast party here. We still had cast parties. Nilo's presence attracted odd entourage. His girlfriend Primes was a frequent visitor. You're not as big as I imagined. So I said, fuck it, let's build a ziggurat. There was a weird energy in the air, a strange alignment of ancient and new. The set took on a new significance and outsized reality. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. All right, here we go. Our host nation, redacted, on the other hand, began to resemble a theatrical set. The parliament, a theme park, miniature version of the real thing. Their economy became dominated by Nilo in no time. Its culture, a curious melange of foreign influences, betrayed a long history of colonization. Welcome, Nilo. What's up? Nilo's industrial empire was an irresistible force, more real than any nation. Transport, network, space, tunnels. Next page, in context. Day to day, it didn't seem like we were filming anything. Occasionally, a small crew showed up to film a training session or something. I didn't really know what my role was. Malcolm seemed satisfied, so I put it out of my mind. After Nilo deployed the Chaikin drones, even the small crews became unnecessary. The plot, less important. The bustle on New Atlantis, a hypermodern palace emerging from the ocean, became sufficiently captivating. It was a new society not seen on the planet in millennia. I didn't know how my presence contributes, but I knew I didn't want it to end. I can fight and build muscle and act with sincerity. I've done many films and shows, but none where I wanted to live. Here, the script and life merge into one. My script is my constitution. I am ready to smile for Atlantis. And that's kind of where I'm ending this, because I thought it was gonna have a little bit less time here, but you know, the story kind of goes on and kind of merges with the space program in a strange way. But that's the book and a few pieces from it. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Tom. And we'll get to questions after I introduce, and we get to hear a little bit from Felipe and Juan. Felipe Melo is an award-winning musician, film director, and author from Lisbon, Portugal. I'll have the link, Felipe, later of the ballad at the very end. After studying at the Berklee College of Music, he has worked as a jazz pianist, producer, and composer, and written comics for an international audience. Juan Cavia is an art director and illustrator from Buenos Aires, Argentina, who has worked in comics, advertisements, TV, music videos, theater, and feature films, including the award-winning The Secret in Their Eyes. Felipe and Juan, I wasn't sure, do you have any sort of PowerPoint or slide that you would like to share?
Yes, we're here to present our latest book. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Ballad for Sophie. And Juan is the organized one, so he did a whole PowerPoint thing, keynote.
Great.
Now, actually, hi. I have here sort of, I have for one hand, the comic book that we can see a little bit. I don't know if I can share. Yes, I can do it.
You should
This
be
is
able
the
to
book.
share it.
Okay, thank you. I have it here. Sure. First of all, please be patient with my English because I am very awful with the English language.
Your English is great, but you do speak in a very high-pitched voice. Your voice.
My
like
voice in Spanish,
fire.
it's more, yes,
Very low.
more like that. And I'm sorry for that. So, Philip, could you please explain something about the process or the comic book, and I will.
Of course. So basically, Juan and I have been friends for many, many years. We met through film. Actually, we both love film and we work in film, and we we did meet because of a film festival 10 years ago, and this is our 7th book. We basically had no formal education in comic books, so we learned as we went along. But we were very lucky because our first book actually was picked up by Dark Horse, so we were very happy about it. But we did learn a lot by making the book and learning from the mistakes. So basically, as we learned a bit more on storytelling and structure and narrative, we worked on this book, which is the story of an old man who talks to a journalist, and we realized that he was a concert pianist, and he had a one-sided rivalry with another piano player, a prodigy. And so this rivalry story is kind of a trigger to go and tell the story of this man. This takes place in an imaginary France, meaning it's France, but all the city names are made up, so it's a fiction version of France. And so we go back on his life and his memories, and we realize his choices weren't always the best ones. So we kind of reflect on the meaning of life, on the power of music, and on bad decision making and the search for redemption. So it's all kind of ambitious way of putting it. Since we both love music, I mean, it's my like, I'm very privileged to say it's my daytime job. And Juan is an excellent piano player, so we could talk music for real. And it's a connection with the love for the piano, and of course a way to improve our storytelling. And I think it was a big effort for both of us. Go ahead, Juan.
Now, I don't know what can I add to that, but probably there's the first thing that you said. We don't came from the comic book world. I work on movies and Philip too, and music and several stuff of art movement, but not exactly from the graphic novels. So we can work in a different way. So probably the book is a little weird in terms of I don't know, how can I say, Philip, please help me. Something it's not straight in a way, because it's a journey about a life of a character, and the thing is,
oh, of course, I know what you're saying. Basically, it's not a linear story because the
yes,
character, we see it as he sees it, not exactly as it happened, right?
exactly.
So the reader, in a way, has to decipher what was real or not. So
Yes,
there's always that
exactly.
kind of frontier between the two worlds, the fictionary and the real, are very difficult to follow.
And
But-
here, yes, sorry.
And of course, maybe you can talk a bit about the process, how we did it.
Yes, probably. Let me share something here, because I have kind of also PowerPoint, but share screen. This is another screen. This is here because it's particular because we work together, but in comic books. And
of course, we have an ocean between us. That's we actually met at the presentation of our first book. It was already published.
Exactly.
In person. But
so we in I don't know, in this last 10 or 12 years, we make a kind of I don't know, a personal way of working. And in the last book, I think we found a way to express our ideas in the best way, because Philippe starts with a kind of mood board with the script in a page, and in another page some references and pictures and things and notes even, and I start a kind of layout, working with that and the character designs. But there's a thing that I think it's very, I don't know, useful for us, that we designed for this book in particular, and it's a kind of I don't know, to translate the time in the pages. And this is I don't know if you can see this kind of translation of ideas, like, okay, this is the way that Philippe in the side, in the left side, Philippe imagine the time of the translation of that script into images. And then I make a first sketch, and then I make a cleanup, and we discuss about that. I think that the most difficult translation in movies and comic books is the timing and the intention, because you can try to explain in a script, but it's difficult to transmit to the other part of the team. For example, in this case, for an artist, for a drawing, for a colorist, the feeling that you want to transmit. So we found this way to separate the pages, and I think it's very useful. Actually, if you see here in the first slide, this is the process in a way, the regular process. No, you have the script, and then a sketch, a cleanup, and the process, the color process. But in between the sketch and the script, we found a way that we can separate the time in a blank page with just notes. And for me, it's I don't know, it's like a mind fuck, because now I can understand the way that Philippe feels the timing of the script. Like, okay, for me, it's like in 3 pages. Like, I don't know the drawings, I don't know the backgrounds, but the character talks here, and there's a pause, and then talks here in the second page. And for me, this was amazing, and we found it because of the distance, in a way, because of the different with the hours. I don't know. It's probably it's not important, but for us, it's very like a big change.
And it's a long book. It's like 300 pages long. So we've been doing this for a while, and we were very lucky, and we feel very fortunate. The book is coming out through Top Shelf, which was actually insane, because we were locally published, right? I live in Portugal. We have a local publisher, but I said that I was going to send the book, the PDF, to 3 different publishers a day, so hoping I could get it published outside Portugal. And I was very, very happy, because I sent it to a free submission thing at Top Shelf, because I love their books, and Chris Starrs wrote, and he said that it's been a long time since he started reading a book and he couldn't stop. So he answered like 3 hours after I sent the PDF. And the book is coming out in the US in November, which is very, very, very beautiful and important for me, because I lived there for 4 years, and I basically learned music in the US, and I lived as a jazz musician there. So it's a very beautiful experience. So I hope you get to read it. We hope we both do.
Well, thank you so much. I would first like to say I've been doing the moderating for graphic novels panels for a very long time, and I've never seen such a thorough process. And I think a lot of the people who come to these sorts of panels, especially for the moderator or for the graphic novel panel, say, well, how do I do this? What are you doing to get to that completed work? And I think that's a great place to start off. I was wondering, Tom, if you could also talk about your writing process, which is both of these graphic novels are wonderful and so different. One is this epic over 300 pages. And Tom, you work in these very crisp vignettes. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, the book kind of originated as separate short stories created for the Mome anthology that Fantagraphics was publishing back in like early 2000s. And so it was always short stories, and basically it was just an excuse to like, hey, there's a new issue of Mome, I need to contribute something to it. And as I sort of started doing these stories, this idea of like of the number as a title kind of came up. So like the first story was 100,000 miles, the next story was 10,000 years, another story was 976 square feet, and this kind of became like an overarching element that sort of started to connect the stories together. In terms of process, my process is, because I write and and draw at the same time. My process is a little bit different. I don't really write like a full script out. I tend to work kind of directly in a sketchbook. I'll draw. Sometimes I'll draw a sequence and then write the text afterwards. Sometimes I'll write some stuff and then create a sequence around it. It's really very kind of organic. A couple of the stories, I wrote completely after they were drawn. And then completely erased all the words and rewrote it on top of the existing images. So, it's really gone through like a lot of different kind of permutations. But in terms of, to kind of in the generic sense, it definitely goes through a kind of a sketch, to ink stage and color after that. So it's, that's pretty common to comics in general as a kind of general process.
Thank you. I'd also like to throw out for all of our attendees, if you would like to ask any sort of question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. We'll get to it. I think these are great when they become very conversational with the attendees. I would like Christopher Brown to jump in. Christopher wrote such a wonderful introduction to Tom's work. Christopher, can you talk a little bit about how you know Tom and how you got to be a part of that?
Yeah, I first started reading Tom's work when these pieces were appearing in Mome, that Fantagraphics kind of, I don't know, quarterly magazine that started coming out right around the time of the financial crisis. A remarkable little thing to see. It was really like the first ever like literary magazine of comics. And I remember being kind of really blown away at the time about the way that these short little pieces that Tom had put together combined the humanism and the humor that I associated with a lot of other great comics of the time, the kind of, works of the Daniel Clowes school, things that were really brought in all this closely observed material from contemporary American life. But they also had this like intellectual and idea-driven engine that was like at the level of like J.G. Ballard. And it was an unusual combination to see. One often sees in comics the use of the comics form as a way to kind of turn it into like a literature of ideas, but it's rarely combined really well with comics power as an almost cinematic storytelling medium. And then I somehow connected with Tom. It turned out that he had been reading this little group blog I had at the time, and that led to a kind of ongoing conversation. And as I followed his career and then followed his formation of his own small press, where he started publishing all kinds of work of others, and then his further flowering into kind of one of our greatest comics critics, who takes that kind of idea power and puts it to work, sort of talking about, you know, everything from the, you know, the deep semiotics of multiverse superhero silliness to the kind of the very smarter sides of comics. And I just can't recommend the work highly enough, and was delighted to get to try to provide some kind of a critical and fanboy framework for how to think about it.
I definitely had with both books the amount of ideas that are going on in both, from the musicality of Ballad for Sophie to a kind of dialectical hyper reality constantly going on in beta testing. I was wondering if, starting with Ballad for Sophie, if everyone could kind of talk about, did you start with this sort of theme for your content of, it starts with, I want to focus a work on music, or I want to focus a work on this idea, or does the characterization come in? Both have such colorful characters in it.
Well, I guess all stories derive, I mean, the ones that matter at least, derive from a personal urge to speak about something that troubles you, something that you love. In this case, it was a bit of both, because we did start with a very traditional frame of a story, rivalry and envy between two musicians. But then suddenly we all we needed was basically an excuse to talk about very personal things. And both for me and for Juan, we're kind of like we're a band basically. So we do speak a lot and talk a lot to each other about many things, and I think this book is a direct result of that, of our anxieties as artists or as people, our relationship to others, and to getting older also. I mean, even today, you know, like I'm realizing that my eyebrows are getting longer. This didn't happen. Now I have these giant eyebrows, and I think, okay, time is really passing. And soon enough, you know, I'll be an old man, and we all try to live without regrets, at least. And basically, I guess the book is somebody who made a lot of bad decisions is trying to find like a meaningful ending, you know. Mm-hmm. So basically, this is our story and our motor for the book. This was it, I think.
Yeah.
You know, in some ways it's similar with me. And, you know, there's before beta testing the apocalypse, I was doing kind of a little bit more autobiographical work. And but when I started doing these stories, I kind of wanted to push away from autobiography, but still obviously write about something that you know, was close to me and you know, kind of was informed by my own experiences. And you know, the first story, you know, this in the book is this, you know, kind of character kind of driving around in a car, kind of through the kind of suburban edgelands of Washington D.C. And you know, it's from my own experience. I lived there for briefly and commuted, you know, for a very long time every day. Commuted between where I lived in D.C. and where I worked at AOL at the time, the greatest company in the world at that time. And you know, and this experience of driving kind of connected to, you know, I had been reading J.G. Ballard at the time, and it, you know, sort of was thinking about his car novels, his kind of idea of like, you know, being present, and how that was also kind of science fictional at the same time. And it just kind of went from there, and kind of I built this a little bit of a kind of a strange story around this character just driving around, trying to, you know, kind of trying not to go to work. And but I also wanted to start to connect it to something larger. You know, like the way Ballard kind of thinks about things, there's always a little bit of a kind of a layer of kind of primitive humanity just below the surface of civilization. And I was, you know, I was really kind of fascinated with that. And as I started creating more and more of these stories, I tried to uncover that layer a little bit more and a little bit more, a little bit more, and really started to kind of connect to the idea of like deep time, deep space, and like thinking about how this little planet of ours, our little lives, connect these really large, cosmic kind of entities and structures. So that's sort of like, slowly as I kind of was doing each story, these layers started to kind of form and create some kind of coherent or semi-coherent whole.
I like the way that you ended that, of a semi-coherent role. I think that gets us to, and I think the same is the case for Ballad for Sophie. You don't know what is, actually true, what the maestro is saying is possibly false. Also, the kind of imagination of the goat-headed man, Triton, that takes place in it. We have a great question from Thomas Moore, and he puts his question for Ballad for Sophie, but I think it would be great to hear from you, Tom, as well afterwards. What influenced the choice to tell the story in this non-linear fashion? Both stories jump around in time, even the vignettes are bouncing around, and Tom in beta testing has this great graphic that he showed us at the beginning where it shows all the different space and time that it jumps around, and so does Ballad for Sophie. Can you tell us about what influenced that choice to write that way?
Of course, it's very interesting, the relationship between the two books, actually, because the notion of time is, of course, related to emotional matters also, because, I mean, we do have a certain amount of time on this planet, or as a civilization, or as a human being, and our memory chooses certain moments, right? And they become important. So when we tell a story, we do have to edit, like it's an editing process. We choose to tell this moment and this moment, and in that aspect, both books are similar. Like we're telling fragments of time, and so I think that gives us a non-linear aspect to it, because memory is also subjective, because it's not a concrete image, it's something pretty undecipherable. If you think about memories, you have a vague idea. Sometimes you remember a dialogue, sometimes you remember a piece of clothing. So all these mind things and memories and emotions is very complex to actually translate some kind of. So this is the way we try to do it, like to tell a life story in a fairly linear way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, our memory is sort of, we do actually have kind of like an internal GPS that kind of, helps us memorize things. And emotions kind of act as like an additional signal. So like, maybe you actually remember things in a kind of space-time continuum, but then the emotions are kind of the third dimension that kind of help you remember specific moments, events, or places. I didn't know this at the time when I was writing this, but this is something that I've learned more recently. But there was always kind of a little bit of an intuition for me, kind of connecting the discontinuities of our lives and these, kind of disparate stories, but again, like, as I said in the very beginning, I do connect all the stories kind of exist in the same headspace, so there is kind of a continuity between them, even if it's not obvious in a kind of like obvious spatial way. There is kind of there's a similar kind of mental something, je ne sais quoi, I don't know, that connects all the different characters and their different predicaments.
Christopher, I was wondering if you had any questions. I know you were able to check out both.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about reading. It was a pleasure to read both books and to reread in Tom's case. And I was thinking about, as I thought about both of the books, kind of sitting down here this afternoon, about there's an old critical saying commonly quoted by writers in the US that writing about music is like dancing about architecture. And
Yeah, no,
and
that's cool.
and both of these books, I mean, here we have a 300-page graphic novel that revolves very heavily around the experience of hearing music, right? And then we have this collection of short graphical pieces that are very heavily about the built environment and infrastructure and a lot of things that we think of as more, we typically tangibly experience. I wonder if you all could talk about some of the challenges of using this particular form of comics to deal with the kind of material that you're dealing with here, and why you were drawn to taking on that challenge.
Okay, one thing I did notice about Tom's work is that he focuses a lot on silence also, which is almost like music, right? So I did feel the silence reading his book, imagine the silence, and the importance of silence also, which is something which doesn't get the attention it deserves. But writing about music is indeed like a very challenging thing, because in literature you have to imagine the images, right? In comics or graphic novels, you do have to imagine the sound. In film, you do get a bit of everything. So at the very end, there's a piece of music that we included in the book, and I didn't want to write it because I always thought whatever I wrote would be far worse than whatever people imagined. It's like kind of seeing the monster in the closet, right? The reader always imagines a worse monster than the one that we see. But this is, to one's credit, he forced me to, he said, you need to write.
Yes, I push it.
Yeah. So I ended up doing it. So, but I do think that it's not as easy, but it's very beautiful to make the reader imagine the sound rather than having it on the book as a very concrete thing. So we do have one piece. There's a lot of music in this book that the reader just has to imagine it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a really good kind of encapsulation of the different ways that books and film and comics kind of approach sound and or no sound, silence. Yeah, I mean, I basically, I was very conscious about that, about how, we can't, as cartoonists, we can't specifically, make you hear the sound. So I would kind of, I would try to kind of use special effects, kind of, classic comic special effects where you have a little, kind of onomatopoeic sound kind of thing. Occasionally I would kind of make up new ones, and then obviously through like description, creating through words, trying to kind of create an impression of what something might have sounded like. I even in the index, I have an index of all the sound effects used in the book. So if you go into the index and go under sound effects, you'll find like several columns of sound effects that are listed in the book. So to me, sound is really important, and it's something that humans as kind of a species have done for a long time, and in that sort of short strip, Noise of History, I also kind of wanted to what's the word here, to say that part of human history is also the history of like sound production, of creating new sounds and new sound environments and new ways of kind of expressing things, to the point where now we're kind of wearing headphones and we have these like very kind of intimate, small, but also infinitely variable sound environments that are like very, very personal. And then also, I wanted to connect all that to kind of the larger space and time of the universe, with talking about quasars and how supernova can kind of affect the sort of the background hum of human existence. So a sound is this thing that really like connects us to a lot of different things in this massive way. It just kind of permeates permeates our lives, and the absence of it, that absolute silence, can also kind of bring about new sounds that we don't hear because they're being drowned out by something else. So that's kind of how I was thinking about sound and the whole thing.
I love that we got to talk about the musicality of both works. I'm going to put in the chat, if you want to check it out, please check it out after the panel, the Top Shelf's Twitter, where they have Ballad for Sophie, the actual ballad. So it's wonderful to check out. And I love that in the image, you get to see Maestro floating, and it's a great use of that. Since we were talking about sound, I would also like to add in the use of color in both works is strikingly different. And I think in graphic novels, we're used to, okay, work is in black and white. And some of the most prominent comic books that we've seen are in black and white. But the use of color in both of these works is very unique and specific. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the coloring of Ballad for Sophie and how that affects tone.
Okay, we had a challenge, here, because there's a story about memories. There's a character talking about his past and different moments of the 20th century. And during the process of the drawings, I was wondering, how can I make or take a decision to make easier for the reader to understand when you are in a flashback and when you are in the present time. And I remember to think about that and think in movies, because in movies it's not always like that, but it's very common to find the flashbacks in black and white, because the past of the movies is in black and white. The first movies, so there's like the past of the way you are looking life, because you are looking a movie with all the decisions, and the past of the movies are in black and white, not the real life. So I thought, or I tried to in that moment to translate that decision to the comic book. And so I started to understand different ways to make some textures and colors that you find like, okay, this is like a vintage comic, like an old version of the same art. And so you can notice, if you are reading the book, it's not very like obvious, but it's I mean it's subtle, but you have it here. Actually, we can see some examples.
Yeah, I would love to see, because when it jumps back in time, I think the first time for the memory, it suddenly gets incredibly blue, and you're playing with blue and red in such a lush, beautiful way. I think an image would be great.
And in the first time, Philippe had some kind of joke, and in the first time you see this kind of non-realistic way. You have a kind of it's not the first time, it's actually it's the second one, that you go to the past. And you have here, let me show you, because it's very, this is the first time in the book that you go to the past, and we try to do it in the same page to establishing the code. In the following pages, probably you need to turn or to change the page to jump into the past or into the present time. But in the first time, we had that kind of effect, like the comparison between the hands and of the same character as a child and as an old guy. And actually, we have some kind of the same. This is second part when you see the main character back in time again, and okay, this is the guy again, and okay, this is my teacher, Hubert Riton, and she said a goat. Yeah, and the character said, yes, I remember like that. So let me following with the story. And I think that the color process was very difficult in this comic book because of the pandemic. I didn't have the chance to see the tests, and it was very it was a risk with all these effects and things and textures and noises and things. So I don't remember, Felipe, but I guess that we make like, I don't know, 10 different tests of textures and noises and things to see this kind of effects, because of the tones and the half tones and the, I don't know, different saturation, to see the difference between these times, right? These two stories at the same time.
We got about a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Tom, I know that you, with yours, you went for, to contrast that, you went for a very monochromatic look with your different vignettes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and
Sure.
how you chose from a soft pastel pink to suddenly a stark, warm color.
Sure. Yeah. One reason was to just differentiate the different stories with the different kind of color. Although each story has, the color kind of tries to kind of underscore the kind of the vibe of the story. But I also use the colors in a kind of a little bit more abstract way. Sometimes they do act like as just, basic shadows or tones or something that kind of approximates some kind of rendering of the character. But sometimes I use the color as a kind of a way to point out a specific element in the page, or to kind of draw attention to some kind of effect that is happening to the character. So the color kind of acts in kind of multiple different ways, and I definitely wanted to keep it a little bit simple, more abstract, more a little bit kind of removed from reality, to kind of underscore the general kind of headspaceness of this thing. It's, you can almost kind of see it as a kind of a primitive computer graphic or something, a kind of simulation without the kind of the reality of the color, so it's mostly kind of like almost like I think of it a little bit almost like cell shading or something like that, but then with this additional factors of underscoring specific moments and specific elements.
I feel like we only scratched the surface with these two amazing works. I highly recommend to all of our attendees, please check out these works. You will read them and reread them over and over again. It was so wonderful getting to talk to everyone. Thank you to Christopher Brown, Tom Kaczynski, Felipe Melo, and Juan Cavia. Thank y'all so much. I highly recommend that you go at 1 p.m. and check out the Kevin Brockmeyer panel and hear some ghost stories. It's perfect time for it. And please enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you so much, panelists.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.